We are continuing the subject of between two worlds. From last Sunday. And at the start, let me caution you to remember that you cannot be confused by the message, but you may be confused by words, language, semantics. We speak of two worlds. And the Master says, my kingdom is not of this world, confirming the idea of two worlds. And yet, the truth is that there is only one world. God made all that was made. Anything that God did not make was not made. Therefore, since God is spirit, the only world is a spiritual world, and the only man is spiritual man. Then, what about my kingdom is not of this world, or the two worlds of the infinite way? And here is where you must remember at all times that there is but one world, and it is spiritual. But that we entertain a materialistic concept of that spiritual world, and that world of concepts constitutes the second world. It isn't really a world any more than the world of the insane is a second world. It is merely a world within their mind, an imaginary world that they have conceived, has no external existence. And so, this materialistic concept of a world has no externalized existence, and the proof of it is that as we are enabled through the development of spiritual discernment, the spiritual faculties, to see the world as it is, that materialistic concept evaporates, and in its place is the world of harmony. To illustrate this, the world of diseased people is a very real world to material sense. But you will notice that when the sick are brought for spiritual healing, that the entire world of the sick changes. And not only that the sickness evaporates, but actually those who have been sick find themselves with an entirely different concept of life. Therefore, while there is but one spiritual universe, the kingdom of God, which is the same on earth as it is in heaven. Yet, we as humans cannot behold heaven on earth. Until we have developed our spiritual faculties. You remember the Master says, judge not after appearances, judge righteous judgment. And the meaning of this is, as long as you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell with your 5 physical senses, you are judging after appearances. The 5 physical senses cannot bear witness to truth. We see materially, we hear materially, we taste, touch, and smell materially. Now, if you are to behold heaven on earth, you must develop the spiritual faculty of discernment. And here you have an entirely new faculty, an entirely different one from any of the human faculties. And by this faculty, you can discern the world of God's creating. Let us take the realm of sin. The woman taken in adultery, the thief on the cross. And if you are judging by human standards, and if you are judging through seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling, it is inevitable that you say, yes, this is a woman taken in adultery, yes, this is a thief who has been caught. If you have the Master's faculty of spiritual discernment, you look at both of these and declare, neither do I condemn thee. Not be thou punished, but thy sins be forgiven thee. In other words, I find no evil in you whatsoever. All spiritual healing work is based on the power of spiritual discernment. Be assured, spiritual healing has no relationship to praying to God to heal anyone or reform anyone or forgive anyone. This form of prayer, even for the noble purpose of healing, is as archaic as the ancient of days. Spiritual healing has no relationship to praying to God to free anyone or to forgive anyone or heal anyone. Spiritual healing has to do with the faculty of spiritual discernment, whereby an individual who has attained some measure of spiritual discernment is enabled to see and to declare, "Thou art my beloved child, in whom I am well pleased." No iniquity has touched thy household, soul, mind, or body. Remember, the eyes contradict this, the ears, the nose, the taste, the touch, all of this contradicts spiritual sense. And so you can understand a person who reviewed parenthesis in eternity and said, "It's very well if you can believe that spiritual nonsense." And surely you must be able to see how right that reviewer is when you understand that they were seeing, reading with the eyes, hearing with the ears, and how foolish it must have seemed to be told that I and the Father are one, and that all that the Father hath is mine, and that no weapon that is formed against me shall prosper. Think how ridiculous this is to a person who is witnessing all of the weapons that have been formed against man and how beautifully they are operating. You see, when you read the 91st Psalm, you are very apt to read all of those passages about no evil shall come nigh my dwelling place and so forth and so on, and at the end of it be very puzzled and say how ridiculous. All these evils have come nigh my dwelling place and my neighbors and my families and my friends. It is only when you catch a glimpse of that first sentence, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High." In other words, he that has risen to the place of dwelling in the higher consciousness is living in an entirely different world. And there, the weapons that are formed cannot prosper, and the evils that float around in the air cannot come nigh thy dwelling place. But this applies only to those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High, or as the Master teaches in the 15th chapter of John, he that abides in the Word, he that lets me, the Christ, abide in him. In this human world, there is just one mind, and everyone is attuned to that one mind, and therefore everyone receives the impressions, impulses of both good and evil. Probably the purest humans that have ever lived have at some time or other been tempted with carnal thoughts. Probably the most honest of men have in their business or professional careers at some time or other been tempted to lie, cheat. The reason is, of course, that whatever is common to that one universal human mind is common to all of us. Therefore, we are not only tempted with what the world calls sin, we are tempted with disease, with fear, with lack, because this universal human mind is made up of abundance and lack, of health and disease, of life and death, of wealth and poverty, and all of the gradations in between. Now, until we learn better, these are the temptations that come to us, and each handles these temptations in a different way. Some of these temptations may make no impression upon you whatsoever and may affect me. Some may not affect me at all and may affect some of you. But at some time or other, be assured that in our humanhood we are tempted by good and by evil. We are tempted to experience good in ways that later turn out to be not so good. This is, of course, the world that the Master referred to as this world. It is a mental world, because you cannot carry out anything physically without first accepting it in mind. Your body cannot even be sick without your first accepting sickness in mind. The body certainly could not sin, couldn't even steal, defraud, unless that were first accepted in mind. Now we have my kingdom, my world. And here you have what is called in the Bible that mind that was in Christ Jesus, that which we call the infinite or divine consciousness, which is our goal in this message of the infinite way. This, remember always, is our goal. We are not seeking health or wealth or happiness or companionship or peace on earth. We are seeking only the Father's house, the divine consciousness, the Spirit of God, that mind that was in Christ Jesus. And the reason is that once you have made contact with it, once you have access to the divine consciousness, you find that you are more and more becoming separated from the mind of man. You are experiencing less of the mind of man and more of the mind of God. The ultimate is, of course, when we attain full conscious union with God, with divine consciousness. So far, Paul tells us, and it has been our experience, that we cannot claim to have fully attained to that yet. Therefore, we are still subject to some of the world's temptations. It may be the temptation of illness. It seldom is a temptation of a major sin. It may be the temptation of loneliness or lonesomeness. But in some measure, now and perhaps for a while to come, we must remember that we have not yet fully attained. If by chance any one of you has fully attained, you will know it, and you will know that you are the exception to whom I am not speaking. In our studies, you must give recognition to the fact that there is this material sense of existence which is responsible for any of the ills or discords that come our way. In other words, do not look for a devil to blame it on. There isn't any. Do not look for neighbors to blame it on, or enemies, or relatives, because even though the evil may appear in the form of one or more individuals, you never will meet it spiritually. You never will meet the discords and inharmonies of life spiritually while you are accepting appearances and believing that it is a person, a group, a nation, an ideology, or the weather or the climate, or infection or contagion that is responsible for your ills. The ills are due only to one thing: a material sense of existence. And to the extent that you and I are still troubled with problems, be assured of this: it is that some measure of material sense still persists. We still entertain a material sense of body, or we still entertain a material sense of weather, or climate, or germs. We may even entertain a material sense of wind and waves, volcanoes and earthquakes. Now remember, these are not material, for God created all that was made, and God is spirit. But as we persist in entertaining a material sense of these, they react materially upon us. In proportion as a temptation comes to you, and you can impersonalize it by recognizing it as material sense, you very quickly free yourself of it, because neither you nor I created material sense. Not even the communists did that. It existed before communism was known. It existed before the materialism of Caesar was known. Material sense has been with us from the beginning of a materialistic world, because there is no materialistic world. There is only a materialistic sense that appears to us as a world. If you can watch as a temptation touches your consciousness, a temptation in your own experience or your neighbors or your friends or our enemies, if you can be alert and instead of trying to protect yourself from it or resent it or pray to overcome it, if you can be quick enough to realize, now this is material sense, but creation itself is spiritual. This is material sense, but man is spiritual. For man was created in the image and likeness of God. Man has the qualities of God and the quantities of God. Son, all that I have is thine, both in quality and quantity. Therefore, when we see other than that, we are seeing material sense. Even when we see structural man, physical man, we are really seeing material sense. Why? There is no such thing as a structural man. Man is that selfhood that is looking through your eyes. Man is completely invisible to eyesight. No one has ever seen man with their eyes. And therefore, the moment we think in terms of sinful man, diseased man, deformed man, we are merely permitting material sense to govern our thought, our vision. The moment we can look at the crippled man and say, what did hinder you pick up your bed and walk? It means that we are really looking into his eyes and seeing man behind the eyes. The spirit, which is man, the life, which is man, the soul, the intelligence, which is man, the love, which is man, and all of these incorporeal. Every spiritual healing that has ever taken place bears witness to the fact that someone was sufficiently spiritually illumined not to accept appearances. Material sense has to do with quantities and qualities. But spiritual discernment has no awareness of quantities, not even large quantities. No qualities, even good qualities. Because spiritual discernment knows only the allness of spirit. Spirit which is indivisible. Son, all that I have is thine, and this means all of the intelligence, all of the life, all of the love, all of the spirit, all of the truth, all of the peace, all of the joy. And when we open our consciousness to this, we begin to discover that you really do not divide up these qualities among millions of people, but each may know them in their fullness. This calls for alertness. Only this very morning, I received a letter from a student saying that they had an awakening last week because for a long time they have been waking up each morning filled with gratitude for their blessings and then thinking of their blessings in terms of health and supply and husband and home. Instead of realizing that gratitude is for the grace of God, for the Spirit of God, for the omnipresence of God, for the love of God. All these other things that she had been grateful for were merely added things which couldn't have been there but for the grace of God and the love of God. We may say thank you to each other for the gifts of the things of this world that we give to each other, but we cannot thank God for them. For God has no awareness of whether your dresses are made in Paris or New York, or whether your diamonds are from Tiffany or the 5 and 10. But gratitude can fill us soul, mind, and body when we stop to think of the love of God that envelops us, the grace of God that feeds and clothes and houses us, the grace of God that supplies us even with 12 baskets full more than we need. So you see, that material sense would even make us grateful for material limitation. And this sometimes gives rise to strange situations, like one person tearful with gratitude for $100 and another person bemoaning their fate over $1,000. And then you see how foolish it is to be grateful for amounts or to think in terms of amounts. Spiritual discernment sees God as the consciousness of individual being, the love, the life, the truth, the spirit that indwells individual you and me. Spiritual discernment does not see you as persons with qualities of your own and limitations of your own. Spiritual discernment sees God appearing as individual being and realizes that every individual has the allness of the Spirit of God, of the grace of God, of the presence of God. This may not appear to be so, judging by appearances, but always remember that what you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell represents the material and limited sense of things. What you discern inwardly will be closer to the truth. It is for this reason that if we would be helpful to the world, we must forget our praying about peace on earth or victories over the enemy or victories of our way of life over another mode of life, or victories of our favorite political party over the other. If we would benefit the world, we must pray in spirit and in truth. And this means that we must look through the appearances with our powers of spiritual discernment and behold God's government of man and of the earth, including the weather and the climate. Our monthly 1964 letters will constitute another textbook of infinite way practice, and in the April letter, and when you receive it, the May letter, you will find the basic unique principles of the infinite way, I would rather say the essence of them, in about as condensed a form as I have ever seen them. But you will notice that in the study of these two letters, that you will sharpen, you will deepen your spiritual discernment, because over and over it will be brought to you the hypnotic effect of this world of appearances. Over and over, these will bring to your awareness the fact that you must not be hypnotized by appearances, but close your eyes and let your spiritual faculties bear witness to the truth. This entire year is going to be devoted to the healing ministry. But these 2 months, April and May, are actually the condensed healing principles that are unique to this message. You see, the natural man, Paul tells us, is not under the law of God, neither indeed can be. And, as you now know, it is because the natural man is the man made up of the 5 physical senses, plus a reasoning power which is based on the 5 physical senses. And so, when it was revealed to me that there is no God in the human scene, you can understand now that this meant that there is no God where we are living exclusively through the five physical senses, because the five physical senses give us the testimony of good and of evil. And then when it was shown to me that only by admitting God in consciousness could we bring God to our human experience, then the picture begins to complete itself, except for the question, how do I bring God to my consciousness? And of course, one answer is meditation. The ability to meditate is the ability to open consciousness to the inflow of the Spirit. And that which helps us along the way is living with this truth that has been revealed to us. Of the nature of what the world calls the material world, which we know isn't a material world at all. Remember, God made all that was made. There's no need ever to change this statement in the Bible. And all that God made is good. The mystery is not how did a material world get here, but rather the discovery that it never did. There never has been a second creation, but that which is called the second creation is really the illusory creation of the five physical senses. That which sees a horizon where there is no horizon. That which sees car tracks come together where they do not come together. That which sees weather as sometimes destructive. That which sees germs as sometimes destructive. That which sees people as sometimes destructive. This material sense constitutes that unreal or illusory world, but there is no unreal or illusory world. In the infinite way, you have been taught how necessary it is to learn to impersonalize. Why callest thou me good? There is but one good. Neither do I condemn you. You are not evil. Paul says, I am not evil, yet I do feel a sense of evil in me at times. The things that I would not, that I do. The things that I would, I do not. In other words, there is a sense of evil, but there is no evil. The Master recognized the sense of evil when he recognized the tempter, Satan, offering him a materialistic sense of world and a materialistic sense of power, even a materialistic sense of food. Turn stones into bread. Why? Why? Who needs bread? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word. Man lives spiritually, not materially. Shall we go to the city and get thee some meat? No, I have meat. But the meat he was talking about was the Word of God, Spirit. And yet, having it, that which we call material bread and meat always appear, even as in the case of Elijah, if it has to be brought by ravens, or if it has to appear magically on stones, or if it has to be brought by a poor widow. The externalization will always appear as long as we are not seeking the externalization, but are seeking instead the essence, which is what? The Word. The Word. Man must live by the Word, by truth, by spiritual discernment, spiritual vision. In proportion as I think of myself as Joel in the world, I must likewise take thought about supply and home and companionship and health and old age. But in proportion as I can dwell in the idea that I live, yet not I, Christ liveth my life, I can begin to take no thought about any of those things, and then as a beholder, watch as they all appear in due order. Material sense, then, would convince me of an individual who was born on a certain date, who begins to age at a certain time, who begins to run down in capacity at a certain time. And there follows a lot of anxious thought-taking. In proportion as I can outgrow material sense and think in terms of God as my selfhood, of Christ as my true identity, I can leave off taking anxious thought and occupy all of my thought with whatever work has to be done today. And then behold, as all of these other things, the externals, appear in due order. You see, the two worlds of material sense that builds a human identity and then begins to take anxious thought for its life, health, supply, home, companionship, family. Or spiritual discernment, whereby I realize, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. And then with no anxious thought, fulfill whatever work is given me to do each hour of the day. And behold, that there is this invisible presence that goes before us to make the crooked places straight. Two worlds. The real world of God's creating and God expressed as individual being, your being and mine, friend and foe. And the second world, which isn't a world, but is material sense, which forms its own illusory concepts of a world, and then makes us act like squirrels in a cage. Actually, material sense imprisons us in our own mind, whereas spiritual perception enables us to open consciousness to see through God's wisdom. With God's wisdom, really as God's wisdom. Material sense builds a structural universe where there is no structural universe. Just remember that the entire germ theory is a product of material sense. That the entire concept of weather and climate is a product of material sense. The whole of wealth and poverty is a concept of material sense. And as you think in those terms, you are in this world. And the moment you begin to recognize that God is spirit, you are then perceiving with spiritual discernment, with your spiritual faculties. Just as intelligence enables you to ride on a train, proceeding rapidly on tracks that are coming together in the distance without fear, because you have intellectually discerned that they do not come together in the distance. Just as it is now possible to take a ship beyond the horizon, because intellectually you have learned that there is no horizon in spite of appearances, so you will discover that as your spiritual faculties are enlarged, enriched, deepened, that every aspect of limitation begins to disappear. There are less and less pictures of limitation before you. There is a greater and greater awareness of the fact that the appearances of the five physical senses are not testifying truthfully. Gradually, as you learn not to judge by appearances, but to hold still for a moment and let the Spirit of God bear witness, you will discern spiritually, you will see as God sees. Any time that you are confronted with appearances that you do not understand, stop for a moment, pause if possible, close your eyes, and be receptive, as if you were listening. Speak, Lord. And And then, in place of the sick or the sinning person, you will hear the voice say, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Neither do I condemn him, and neither will you." The ability to move from the material sense world into the world of spiritual discernment is proportionate to your ability to close your eyes to the appearance and wait for that inner intuition, the voice of God, to reveal to you the truth of what you are beholding. It is as simple as that, and it is as difficult as that. Difficult because we have been born and brought up with the idea of looking right at the appearance, and then with our so-called human cleverness, calling it good and evil, and saying what good psychologists we are. But spiritual development demands that instead of coming to judgment, instead of coming to an opinion, that you close your eyes to the appearances, open your ears, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth, and let God bear witness with your spirit. And then the spiritual truth behind the appearance will be made evident to you. Study this carefully so that you really know the meaning of between two worlds. Thank you.